Alright, chapter 6. Chapter 6 starts with where you're finding an equation through a point parallel to this line. So, biggest thing is to remember what happens when you have parallel lines. What's the slope? Right, the same. So that means the slope of the parallel line to this is 2/3, because remember your slope is right there. So all we need to know out of this is that the slope is 2/3 because it's parallel to this line. So if we know then the slope is 2/3 and we have a point that is going to go through 6, 7. Now how can I find an equation for the line? Right, we're going to use that point slope formula. So remember the point slope is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Alright, so we're going to have remember it's whatever's in your y but opposite and whatever with your x opposite, and that's your slope. So I have y 7, so it's minus 7 is equal to my slope of 2/3. X and 6 is here, so it's minus 6. Right? So this is your answer. Alright, so now we want to find an equation that is perpendicular to this, that goes through this. So remember this slope, what is the slope of this line? Yeah, 4/7. Your perpendicular slope, so the one that's perpendicular to the slope, is always opposite sign, so this is positive, so it goes negative, and the reciprocal, so it's 7/4. Alright, so now we have our slope of negative 7/4 and our point of 8, negative 9. So again, we're going to use that point slope. So I have y, and then it's opposite of what's in the y, so it's negative 9, so it's plus 9. Is equal to my slope, which is negative 7/4 x, and then whatever's in the x spot but opposite, minus 8. Alright, here we have 24. It says, are these functions? Now there's a couple ways you can do this. One thing you want to remember is there's two things, and I think I'll write them over here. For every x, there's one y. Or it passes your vertical line test. Means if you draw a straight line down, it only hits the graph once, right? So it only hits whatever your graph only once. Alright, so those are the two ways you can tell if something's a function. So you can graph it or you can do whatever. So the first thing I'm going to do to make sure to see this one is for every x there's one y. So I'm going to see, does x repeat itself? X is 1 here and x is 1 there. So I got to look to see if they're the same numbers. Well, this one's 7 and this one is 10. So that's no, because it's 7 is not 10. It has to be the same number. And if you wanted to, you could just graph it and see. So I'm now only going to graph these 2 points because those are the only 2 points that matter. So we have 1 and 7. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. Actually, I'm going to go by 2. I'm going to go by 2s. So 2, 4, 6, 8. So that would be 8. So 7 is going to be between there, 8. And then 10's there, and 10 would be right there. See how if I did it my vertical line test, it's going to hit twice. So there, and that failed the vertical line test also. So no, it's not a function. Alright, so then let's look at this one. We have 1 and 1, but they're both 7. So that's the same point. So since it's the same point, it's yes, it's a function. Alright. Alright, so now we have here 25. 25 gives me two functions, and it says to find g of x. So I'm going to put it way over here because I know I need a lot of space for b. So g of f. Now what is f? F is 4x squared. So I'm going to go and say 4x squared in for my f right there. Then it tells me to take and put this in for my g. What is g? Right here is g, so I'm going to put in this in for my x's of g. So I have 4x squared plus, instead of x now, I have 4x squared, and then minus 1. Alright. Cleaning it up, I have 4 squared, which is 16. And then, because this square goes to both of them, because that's why they're in the parentheses. So then I have x squared squared is x to the 4th, because you have to multiply that. And then you have, bringing that down, 4x squared minus 1. And that's the answer. Alright. I'm going to start B way over here because I know it's going to take me up. It's going to take some space. Alright, so now the first thing you want to do is you want to rewrite this. This means that we're finding f of g of x. Right? So we're going to put f on the outside and then this g on the inside. So g is x squared plus x minus 1, and that's going to go into the functions x, the x values of the f. Alright, so that we have is 4 times, instead of x now, we have x squared plus x minus 1, and then we square it. Well, what does this square mean? This square means that I have twice this. So that means I have 4 times x squared plus x minus 1 times x squared plus x minus 1. Right? Now, what you have to do is you have to take this variable and multiply it to all three of them, and then do the same with all three of them. So we're going to do that. So we're going to bring down that 4, and then I have x squared times x squared gives me x to the 4th, and then x squared times x is x third, x squared times negative 1 is negative x. And then we take this x here, we have x times x squared is x cubed. So I'm going to actually just line them up so it's going to be easier for me to add them later. So x cubed, x times my regular x is x squared, and I'm looking and I think I messed up on the one before it, so it's x squared, because we have this one was x squared times negative 1, so this is a square. That's the other reason why I like lining them up, because they should be the same. So since I'm like, oh, that's a square, and then x times my negative 1 is negative x. You probably told me that too, didn't you? I said, hey, Miss V, look at the first one. And then negative 1 times x squared is my negative x. Then we have negative 1 times x gives me a negative x. And then a negative and a negative is a positive 1. Alright, so I'm going to check these ones right here because I think I messed up again. I should restart the video, but I don't want to redo all the problems. So let's see if I can find my mistake. So I have, checking this one, we have x squared and x squared is x to the 4th. X squared and x is x cubed. X squared and negative 1 is negative x squared. Then we have x times x squared is x cubed. Oh, this is positive x times a positive x is positive x squared. And then x times negative 1 is negative x. It's always good to recheck your work too before you always, continue and everything. Anyway, so x times negative 1 is negative x. Then we have negative 1 times x squared is my negative x squared. And then we have negative 1 times x gives me negative x. And then a negative 1 and a negative 1 is positive 1. Alright, so now we combined our like terms. I'm going to see if I have any paper underneath here. Not much, but let's see if I can. Combining like terms, I'm going to bring down that 4. And I have x squared, x to the 4th. I have 2 of the x cubes. The first two x squares cancel out, leaving me with just a negative x squared. Then I have a negative x, and a negative x is a negative 2x. And then bring down that 1. And my last step is to multiply the 4 through. So I have 4x to the 4th. 4 times 2 is 8x cubed. Minus 4 times that would be 4x squared. Minus 4 times 2 is 8x. And then 4 times 1 is 4. Alright, pretty long problem. Alright, now C. C says to find f of g of 3. So we're simply going to plug in the 3 value for the x's in our g. So we're going to plug in here 3's for the x's. So we're going to have 3 squared plus 3 minus 1. And this is our g of 3. So we have 9, 10, 11, 12, minus 1 is 11. So then I'm going to find f of 11. So I'm going to put in, for my x's, I'm going to put 11 in, and I'm going to get 4 times 11 squared. 11 squared is 121 times 4 is 484. Evaluate. Remember these brackets? These brackets mean round down. So since we have a negative number, remember we want to round down. So here's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So negative 3 is this way. And we want to round down, so we always want to round to the left. So our answer is negative 4. And here we have 12.7 and 12.7, and we want, here's, if this is 12 and this is 13, we have 12.7 is there, we're still rounding to down. Rounding down means to the left, so the answer is 12. Alright, simplify. Simplify this. Simplify just means to combine everything to the lowest terms. Since it's multiplication, that means we have to FOIL. So we have 4i times 7i gives me 28i squared. So we have our first, and then we have our outer, which we have 4i and 5, which gives me 20i. Inner is your negative 2 and 7, so we have negative 14i. And then negative 2 and 5, which gives me a negative 10. Alright, so now we're going to I'm actually going to make this, what is I squared? I squared is -1. So that means we have 28 times -1 plus 20i minus 14i minus 10. So I have -28, and then we have 20 and 14 i's, so that means we have 6i minus 10, and then last we'll just combine the 28 and the 10. It gives me a -38 plus 6i. I put that negative on the outside, so alright, here we go. 28. The cost of gas varies blank as the cost per gallon. So if we increase the cost per gallon, my cost that I have to pay at the pump would go up every time I go. If it increases, so does my cost. So that means that it's directly. So remember, directly, we have the 2 times, we have directly, and directly is basically if one goes up, the other goes up, and inversely, if one goes up, the other goes down. That's the 2 types that we have to worry about. But since if the cost of the gallon goes up, how much I have to pay, because I buy per gallon, my cost also goes up. Alright. Here we also have for each of the following, identify the slope. So all we're looking for is the slope of this. Alright, so the first one, your slope is always in front of your x. So your slope of the first one is 4/7. Then we have x equals 3. Well, let's draw a little graph of x equals 3. So 1, 2, 3, and there's a line. So that is your vertical. And a vertical line has an undefined slope. And then c is your -7. So -7, y equals -7. We have a horizontal line, and that means no slope. Well, that concludes page 6. One more to go. And remember,